Sergio because you're going to find out about the remarkable work that Sergio has done at different universities in the United States and abroad, work that he's done around the world with his students, with other interested architects and faculty, and with residents of the communities that he's been serving. He's been doing this for decades, and he's really a remarkable model for all of us to aspire to in Chicago. So let me first welcome Sergio.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Roberta. And I have to thank the Grant Foundation because I was reminded that one of the first grants we got to bring the work to the United States was actually from the Grant Foundation, who somehow believed us. So thank you. My work, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking as I walk this extraordinary city that I'm trying to imagine how I can, how I can think how it fits Chicago, which is a city with such an extraordinary built environment. But my work is so grassroots, almost to be the point of being eccentric, but somehow just based on this simple assumption that I started in the 80s with the, that architecture had to be more engaged than it was. And so I actually started my career actually working for the UN and the World Bank for a decade, and then I set out to do this work with students as a kind of attempt to make architecture education more relevant to what I thought was the emerging problems that I was seeing. Working at the UN, I worked in Africa, Northern Africa principally, but some in Central Africa, in South America and India, and in other parts of Asia. Anyway, my work is actually based on a theory that, in the end, I found that what I was doing had a precedent, theoretically, and emerged here actually at the University of Chicago over half a century ago, and under the title of service learning. And I'll come back to that. But actually, I found that a Chileno here, I grew up 15 miles from the Chilean border, so this might appeal to him as well. I came from South America to the United States and realized that there was a kind of, not ignorance, but kind of unawareness of what was going on in the world. And yet, all over the world, we were looking to the United States for guidance, for models and things. And I felt that when I came here, I realized that the country that was leading us to the future was essentially not aware that it was leading us to the future, and that it was setting the path for where we were headed. And I dived, and one time I came up in the middle of the Caribbean in the eye of a storm, and this thing about the eye of the storm of a hurricane is it feels absolutely calm, but you know that it's surrounding it, all hell is breaking loose. So that's what I call it, the eye of the storm phenomenon. And I've been calling it that for the last 2 decades. The kind of sense that it seems like we're in a kind of very stable society, maybe less so now that world economics are impinging and affecting our own condition. But basically, the feeling that why isn't the rest of the world as peaceful as we are? But in a way, the rest of the world is suffering from many of the repercussions of the way we lead life and the choices we make. And so my first act, pedagogically, when I began to teach 20-some years ago was to actually take the students out of the United States, out of the safe zone context, and into the storm so they could see the world through the eyes of people outside. So the thing about humans, and it's shared by all humans, is that we're really kind of busy people. We're just like a species that is so extraordinarily busy at making things that we somehow have managed to build ourselves over the entire world and reconstruct the world in an image that maybe not, that is not cohesive and inclusive of other species. And also, over many cultures that have lived in some kind of sympathetic relationship with nature. And a lot of my work has been in Mexico and Central America, so this image comes from southern Mexico. But there are many cultures there that I've worked who have been client communities that who have essentially become impacted by more aggressive models of human behavior. And they're part of our clients. And they live in places like this. They've been harvesting grass for, in this case, 7 millenniums, weaving the same series of mats in the same sacred sequence, leaving the land in essentially in an untouched way, but working within the cycles of the world. Now my concerns come from both an ecological but also an ethical issue, because I think I set out from the very beginning to look at both environmental and cultural sustainability. How could we maintain the lives of people who are being affected by this, and the ecosystems that were tied to them? And one of my earliest clients actually started working in this community in '82, was communities around giant emerging industrial centers in Mexico. And what you don't see, but the gridded part in the middle, the built part, is actually 165 pharmaceutical companies from the United States and Europe in the middle of extraordinary, one of the most complex ecological zones in Mexico, and placed themselves between 3 villages. The one on the top left is actually 2,800 years old. The one on immediately on this side, right, is about a little over 2,000 years old, and there's a little one down here that you can't see at the very edge that's also 2,500 years old. And by 1992, we were flying satellites. We were at 85,000 people. The population had doubled. By 2006, we were up to 1.2 million people. As people began to move out of the agricultural zones, they moved to where the jobs were, where they can no longer compete with tomatoes coming out of California, because even though they might have invented the tomato, they can't compete with mass agriculture. But what I've done is very simple. I've taken students out of this kind of bird's eye GIS view and kind of put them in the context of these emerging places to see how can architecture participate in being part of the solution. So it's a very simple organization. I head an organization called the Basic Initiative. It has now 20-some universities that are part of it in the United States, Europe, Latin America, and Asia. We bring students together of many different disciplines in a collaborative effort to bring their disciplinary knowledge to bear on solutions that affect change, permanent change, in collaboration with communities throughout the world. And we have sites all over the world. The things that are, of course, at the heart of what we're doing, and these are some of our current project sites throughout the world, and the main thing we do actually is, on one side, I force students to collaborate through a cross discipline. So planners talk to economists, talk to architects, talk to other people who will constitute this future society that you'll be living in. So we learned from the very beginning that we need each other to create significant change. And we also, I forced them to realize that the community holds at least half, if not the most, of the keys to the solution. So I teach them to listen as much as to speak up. So this idea has actually an old basis. You know, I didn't invent this. 2,500 years ago, some Greek philosopher and builder called it praxis, the idea of reflective practitioner. The idea that we reflect on our actions and we think about not only our discipline, but we also think about, you know, everything else is contingent on the decisions we make. The life decisions we make, the professional decisions we make, you know, basically everything we do. We've taken this on in many different ways. I'll get to the design build work, but in one kind of larger way, I've been involved with the UN, writing the part of the Kyoto Protocol, which include the people of the developing world, and we're hoping that they will pass in Copenhagen now. But also at another level, creating a UN project, which is the Millennium Project. It's an educational branch, which is attempting to eradicate 100 and hopefully 200 million of the poorest